Welcome back. The National Judicial Council, NJC, met last week Thursday in Abuja, the Federal Capital Territory. After its meeting, the NJC recommended Justice Mahmood Mohammed to President Goodluck Jonathan for appointment as Chief Justice of Nigeria. If President Jonathan approves the recommendation, he will forward Justice Mohammed's name to the Senate for confirmation. The outgoing CJN, Justice Maryam Aloma Mukhtar, will retire on November 20 when she will clock the mandatory retirement age of 70. But how well has she fared in office? A former president of the NBA, Joseph Daudu, SAN, recently criticized the outgoing CJN. He accused her of treating judges like kindergarten pupils who need to seek her permission on almost every matter.
The tenure of Justice M.A. Mukhtar, GCON, the CJ, has witnessed commendable strides in the fight against corruption within the system. For that, we commend her. But there have, in the process of this battle against corruption, been certain actions that are clearly and unmistakably unconstitutional, and which, if left unchecked and transferred to the next administration, will destroy the entire foundation on which the independence of the judiciary is erected. It is common law that before the emergence of the present leadership, some judges were willing to be thrown. That means leaving their jurisdictions without permission, and thereby affecting output or productivity in a very negative manner. To arrest this debilitating trend, the outgoing Chief Justice of Nigeria had issued directives requiring all justices and judges of all courts, federal and states, to seek our approval before traveling outside the country, at times even in the country for any reason. So judicial officers had to seek approval from the Chief Justice through their heads of court before traveling for medical or even personal reasons. In a number of cases, the Chief Justice of Nigeria has refused permission for a judge, and by way of example, strictly, say in the Federal High Court, traveling abroad, despite positive recommendation from the head of that court. Of late, the situation has degenerated to the point where heads of courts, justices of the Court of Appeal, and the state high courts have been queried by the Office of the Chief Justice of Nigeria because they were cited at conferences in which the Chief Justice herself was attending, ostensibly because they did not take her permission. It is for the head of court to give permission and the CJN to be appropriately notified. To operate in the current manner is to reduce Nigerian judicial officers to kindergarten children under the supervision of an overbearing headmaster or headmistress.
Legal practitioner Ebuade Borua gives an assessment of how well the outgoing CJN has fared and gives suggestions for the incoming CJN.
I cannot agree to say that judges have been turned to school students or in the way that they are required to report. There's need for monitoring, there's need for performance, there's need for evaluation, and there's need for discipline. That she has introduced into the system, and constantly, because she's also the president of the National Judicial Council, petitions are attended to timeously and addressed. Where there is need to sanction judges, they're doing so. Where there's need to absolve them, they do so. So, in all, I see her tenure as having come to sanitize the judicial system, although unfortunately, the challenge we had about the congestion in our courts has not been addressed. It takes average 20 years to prosecute a case from the High Court to the Supreme Court. There are appeals in the Supreme Court now, 2006. Currently, Supreme Court is attending to 2005 appeals. So that means that appeals from 2006 up to now, we have to wait for another 10 years. So maybe that is the only area where I still see challenges, and you could not also throw that at her, because problems of infrastructure, electricity, inadequate judicial officers, lack of proper remuneration, these are things that are responsible for congestion in the courts. So it may not be her own making generally, but left to me, I think that if you want me to rate her, she say maybe she has performed about 85% in that regard. And I know the person who is coming to succeed her is going to do wonderfully, because Justice Mohammed is quite a very erudite scholar on the bench, and I believe that he will probably do better, than his own predecessor.
The incoming CJN, Justice Mohammed, is the next most senior justice of the Supreme Court. He was born in November 1946 and hails from Jalingo in Taraba State. We'll hear a lot more about him in the days ahead. Let's turn our attention now to some of the top stories we tracked in the courts last week.
We begin with the report that a federal high court in Lagos last week Friday ruled that the 36 states of the Federation cannot be made to provide any information based on the Freedom of Information Act. This judgment was delivered in a suit filed by the Legal Defense and Assistance Project led up, which had challenged some states of the Federation to provide information on the bonds raised by them in the capital market. The states refused to provide the information and led up approached the courts to compel them to do so pursuant to the Freedom of Information Act. But Justice Okon Abang held that the FOI Act, being an enactment of the National Assembly, is only binding on the federal government and its agencies, as it is not a residual law, neither is it on the concurrent list. The judge ruled that if it was the intention that the act should be binding on states, the state houses of assembly, which is saddled with the powers to make laws for each state, would have been carried along in the process of enacting the law. Staying with the FOI Act, another judge of the Federal High Court Lagos last week Monday struck out a suit filed by the Incorporated Trustees of the Media Rights Agenda (MRA), which sought to compel the Nigerian Civil Aviation Authority (NCAA) and the Attorney General of the Federation to disclose information on the procurement of some controversial BMW cars bought for former Aviation Minister Princess Stella Odua. MRA had requested for the NCAA's annual budget, the public procurement records of the BMWs, evidence of advertisement, the list of bids tendered, as well as other documents to show that due process was followed in the procurement of the vehicles. It insisted that the information should be disclosed in the interest of public concern, good governance, transparency, and accountability. But Justice Ibrahim Buba agreed with the NCAA that the information requested went outside the contemplation of the FOI Act, as the budgetary allocation for the referred procurement process was already contained in the 2013 budget of the federal government. Another federal high court, sitting also in Lagos, last week held that the Financial Reporting Council had no power to probe banking activities, mergers, and acquisition processes in the financial services industry. The court said this was the exclusive preserve of the Central Bank of Nigeria and the Securities and Exchange Commission, SEC. Justice Mohammed Idris, therefore, stopped the Financial Reporting Council from investigating Access Bank PLC over the acquisition of the defunct Intercontinental Bank PLC. The suit was filed by the former Managing Director of Intercontinental Bank, Mr. Erastus Akingbola. And in Abuja, a Federal Capital Territory High Court last week Thursday declared illegal and unconstitutional the police ban on the Bring Back Our Girls protests. The plaintiffs had engaged in daily peaceful protests to demand for more efforts by the federal government to rescue the over 200 schoolgirls abducted in April by members of Boko Haram sect. The then FCT Police Commissioner, Mr. Joseph Mbu, had banned the protests, though the ban was subsequently reversed by the then Inspector General of Police, Mr. Mohammed Abubakar. The protesters, however, insisted on proceeding with the suit. Justice Alade Toyimbo declared that the pronouncement by Mr. Mbu was a violation of the protesters' fundamental rights to freedom of conscience, expression, assembly, and association as guaranteed by the Constitution. The defense has opened its case in the charge of the murder of late Cynthia Osokagu, the 22-year-old postgraduate student who was allegedly killed in a hotel room in Lagos by men she met on the social media platform Facebook. The first defendant, Okumo Nwabufo, who is charged with her murder, told the Lagos High Court last week Friday that contrary to the news going round, he actually met the deceased at a supermarket in Lagos, became friends with her, and subsequently lovers. He even told the court that he had proposed to her and they were on the verge of getting married before she was murdered. He denied murdering her, insisting that the police had tortured him and made him write the statement which implicated him in her murder. Under cross-examination, however, it was surprising that the defendant did not know his supposed girlfriend's birthday, neither could he recollect where he had made the marriage proposal to late Cynthia. The matter has been adjourned till the 12th of December for the continuation of the trial. And we round off with the news that the coroner's inquest into the cause of the collapsed synagogue church building has heard that the death toll is actually 116 persons. The chief medical examiner of Lagos, a forensic pathologist, gave the figure when he testified before coroner magistrate Oyetade Komolafe last week. He also assured the coroner and the families of the victims that the autopsy report on the bodies will be ready in the next 2 weeks. In his own testimony, the Lagos State Commissioner for Physical Planning and Urban Development, Oluwatoyin Ayinde, said that the collapsed building had no government approval. Meanwhile, a Lagos-based legal practitioner has approached the Federal High Court seeking an order to stop the inquest on the grounds that it will be biased against the founder of the church, Prophet T.B. Joshua. The case is yet to be assigned to a judge for hearing.
And it's on that note we end this edition of the program. You can watch these and past episodes on our YouTube channel. Do also feel free to interact with me via email, Facebook, or Twitter. I'm Shola Shieli. Thank you for watching.